Get up. Hands where I can see them.
Officer, I'm just a passenger. I don't understand.
Don't understand? Get up! Or are your legs as useless as your whole body? Don't tell me what to do, you filthy black man, always so smooth. Filthy scum like you always got an excuse.
Holloway twisted
first
his
you got
arms back.
on.
Cuffs bit into skin. Someone recorded. Someone laughed. No one said a word.
Shut up before I gag you. Whole bush smells worse since you got on.
3 rows up, the drunk white man, the real troublemaker, slumped over, snoring, untouched. Terrence's briefcase hit the floor. Case files scattered everywhere. Neither officer looked down. If they did, they'd wish they never had. The next morning, officers Kyle Brennan and Todd Holloway sat in a fluorescent-lit conference room at the 14th Precinct. 2 styrofoam cups of coffee, 1 incident report form between them. The overhead light buzzed with the steady hum of a building that had stopped caring about maintenance years ago. Brennan wrote first. Suspect, black male, approximately 6'1", 190 pounds, was standing in the aisle of the Route 7 bus, behaving aggressively toward multiple passengers. Suspect used profane language and refused to comply with driver's instructions. Upon boarding the vehicle, officers issued verbal commands to de-escalate. Suspect became physically resistant. Minimal force was applied to remove the subject from the bus. He slid the form to Holloway. Holloway read it, added his badge number, signed. That was the official version. Clean, procedural, bulletproof. 2 officers responding to a disturbance call. 1 non-compliant suspect. Textbook removal. Except, none of it was true. The bus camera, mounted behind the driver's seat, angled down the full length of the aisle, had recorded everything. Every second, every seat, every face. It showed a man in a gray jacket sitting in row 9, a leather briefcase on his lap, turning pages of a document. He didn't stand. He didn't shout. He didn't move until 2 officers grabbed his arms and lifted him from the seat. But that footage hadn't been reviewed yet. Not by Internal Affairs, not by the precinct captain, not by anyone who might have compared it to the words on that report. So the lie held, for now. Captain Lyle Garrett arrived at 8:15 a.m. 31 years on the force. A wide jaw, a firm handshake, and a thick personnel file of complaints he had buried across 3 decades. He picked up Brennan's incident report, scanned it in under 15 seconds, and scrawled his initials at the bottom. "Handled," he said, tossing the form into his out tray. No follow-up questions. No video review requested. No interview with the bus driver. No contact with a single passenger. This was standard procedure at the 14th Precinct, at least when the suspect checked a certain box on the form. Garrett had perfected this rhythm. A complaint comes in, he assigns it to an internal reviewer who already knows the outcome. The reviewer writes, unsubstantiated. Garrett signs off. The file gets archived. The officer gets a pat on the back and a reminder to write cleaner reports next time. This wasn't the first time. Brennan and Holloway had been partners for 4 years. In that span, 14 formal complaints had been filed against them. 14. Every single one involved a person of color. A 17-year-old slammed against a squad car for jaywalking. A 68-year-old grandmother yanked from her apartment hallway because she matched a description. A college junior tased during a routine traffic stop for reaching toward his glove compartment to get his registration, exactly what the officer asked him to do. 14 complaints. 14 internal reviews. 14 times the word unsubstantiated appeared on the final page. Captain Garrett's signature on every one. The system wasn't broken. It was performing exactly the function it was designed for. Brennan knew this. He had learned it early. 6 years on the force, and not once had a complaint stuck. Not to him, not to anyone in his unit. He moved through the streets of the 14th District with the confidence of a man who understood that accountability was a word reserved for press conferences. Holloway was quieter about it. He followed Brennan's lead, wrote what Brennan told him to write, and collected his overtime. If he felt any friction between the reports and reality, he buried it the way he buried everything else, behind a shrug and a sip of coffee. Back in the bullpen that morning, Holloway leaned against his desk, telling the story to two other officers who had gathered for shift briefing. We get the call. Disturbance on the 715 Route 7. Driver says someone's going off, yelling at passengers. We board, and there's this guy in the back, standing up, getting loud. One of the officers raised an eyebrow. How loud? Loud enough. I tell him to sit down. He starts with the "I know my rights" speech. Brennan steps in. Guy grabs Brennan's arm. At that point, it's resisting. We take him down, cuff him, escort him off. Done. Holloway shrugged. Just another loud one on the 715. Handled. No one asked why the bus driver's 911 call specifically mentioned a white male, mid-40s, intoxicated, yelling at me about the route. No one questioned why the arrest report described a completely different person. No one asked because asking was not part of the culture at the 14th. The drunk white man, Gerald Phelps, 52 years old, 3 prior public intoxication charges, had been sitting in row 6 that night, 3 rows ahead of Terrence Foster. He was the one screaming at the driver over a missed stop. He was the one 2 passengers had complained about before the bus even pulled over. He was the subject of the 911 call. When Brennan and Holloway boarded that bus, Gerald Phelps was slumped against the window, reeking of bourbon, mumbling incoherently. They stepped past him without a word. They walked past 2 empty rows. They stopped at row 9, in front of the only black man on the bus, and told him to stand up. Phelps wasn't questioned, wasn't asked for identification, wasn't touched. He rode the bus to the last stop and stumbled off into the night, free as the air he wasted screaming into. Meanwhile, Terrence Foster spent 4 hours in a holding cell at the 14th Precinct. His leather briefcase, containing classified case documents from the district attorney's office, was sealed in a plastic evidence bag and dropped on a metal shelf. No one inventoried the contents. No one noticed the embossed seal of the DA's office on the folders inside. No one looked twice. At 11:47 p.m., a desk sergeant processed his release. No charges filed, no explanation offered. "You're free to go," the sergeant said without making eye contact. Terrence asked for his briefcase. It was returned with a coffee ring stained into the leather that hadn't been there 4 hours earlier. "I'd like to file a complaint," Terrence said. The sergeant slid a form across the counter. Blue ink, 3 pages, small print. "Fill this out. Drop it in the box by the front door." The complaint box was mounted on the wall near the exit. It was overflowing. Forms spilling out the slot, some yellowed with age, corners curling. A graveyard of grievances that no one would ever open. Terrence took the blank form. He folded it in half and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't need to fill it out. He already had a file on Kyle Brennan and Todd Holloway that ran 200 pages deeper than anything stuffed in that box. He had been building it since last July. He knew their patrol routes, their shift rotations, their arrest statistics broken down by race and zip code. He knew the exact dates their body cams had malfunctioned, always during encounters with black suspects, always cleared by the same captain who had signed this morning's report without reading past the first line. What Terrence didn't have, until tonight, was himself. His own body as evidence. His own wrists marked by their cuffs. His own name entered into their system as a suspect. Now he had everything. He walked out of the 14th Precinct at 11:52 p.m. March air cut across his face. He stopped on the concrete steps, looked up at the building. Gray stone, barred windows, a blue lamp flickering above the entrance, and pressed 2 fingers against the bruises forming beneath both shirt cuffs. 8 months of investigation, 200 pages of documentation, 23 separate incidents flagged and cataloged. Tonight made 24. He opened his briefcase under the glow of a streetlight, checked every folder, every page, all accounted for. He closed it, held it against his chest, and walked to the bus stop at the corner. The Route 7 was still running. Terrence Foster's apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Cedar Hill. 1 bedroom, A kitchen table that doubled as a desk. Bookshelves lining every wall. Law textbooks, case histories, 2 framed photos. One of his mother in her nursing scrubs, one of his father in uniform. It was past midnight when he set the briefcase on the kitchen table and unbuttoned his shirt cuffs. The skin underneath was swollen, red-purple where the metal had bitten in. He held both wrists under cold water for 3 minutes, watching the bruises deepen under the kitchen light. The faucet dripped twice after he shut it off. Then, he opened the briefcase. Every document was accounted for. The file tabs were bent, the folders creased from being shoved into a plastic evidence bag, but nothing was missing. He smoothed the pages flat, pressing the wrinkles out with the heel of his palm, and placed them back in order. The last folder was labeled State versus Brennan and Holloway. Internal Affairs Referral, number 2019-0384. He opened his laptop, pulled up a timeline he had been maintaining since July. 23 entries. Each one a date, a location, a name. Color-coded. Yellow for witness testimony, blue for documentary evidence, green for body cam footage obtained through subpoena. He typed a new entry. March 12th. Route 7 bus. Row 9. His own name. He marked it red. The only red entry on the entire timeline. Terrence closed the laptop and sat still for a long time. The apartment hummed. The refrigerator cycling, distant bass from a neighbor 2 floors down, a siren fading on Jefferson Boulevard. He stared at the wall above his bookshelf, where a framed diploma from Howard University School of Law hung slightly crooked. He had never straightened it. It reminded him of the afternoon his mother helped him hang it, her hands trembling, tears she kept swiping away with the back of her wrist, whispering, "Your daddy would have stood right here and cried." His father, Raymond Foster, patrol officer, 9th Precinct, 12 years on the force. Killed during a wrongful arrest in 1998. The official report read, "Officer sustained fatal injuries during physical altercation." Raymond wasn't the suspect. He was the officer who stepped in when 2 colleagues beat a teenage boy face down during a traffic stop. Raymond pulled one of them off the kid. They turned on him. Internal Affairs ruled it accidental. No charges, no trial, no camera. Terrence was 11 when his mother sat him on the edge of his bed and told him his father wasn't coming home. Gloria Foster never spoke about it directly after that. She spoke around it, in silences across dinner tables, in the way she clicked the television off whenever police footage played on the news, in the way she gripped Terrence's hand too tight, walking past the precinct on their way to Sunday service. She raised him alone on a nurse's salary, pulling double shifts at St. Agnes Hospital for 16 years. She pushed him toward anything safe and far from the system that had consumed his father. Medicine, engineering, teaching, anything with a desk and a door that locked from the inside. Terrence chose law anyway. Not for revenge, for a record. He wanted every encounter between a badge and a citizen documented, filmed, time-stamped, and archived where no precinct captain could bury it in a drawer. He graduated top 5 at Howard, turned down 3 private firm offers, took a junior prosecutor position at the county DA's office at a salary that made his classmates wince. Spent 4 years on fraud, tax evasion, and municipal corruption. Built a reputation for preparation so thorough that defense attorneys called him the archivist behind his back. He took it as a compliment. 8 months ago, District Attorney Eleanor Whitfield called him into her corner office and shut the door. Whitfield was 61, silver-haired, and had prosecuted police misconduct twice before. She won both. 14 complaints against 2 officers in the 14th Precinct, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Every one dismissed internally. The pattern looks racial. I need someone who won't fold when the union pushes back. Terrence opened it. First complaint. A 17-year-old named Darnell Price slammed into the hood of a cruiser for jaywalking. Arresting officer, Kyle Brennan. Reviewing captain, Lyle Garrett. Disposition, unsubstantiated. By the 5th complaint, his jaw was tight. I won't fold, he said. He spent 8 months building the case in silence. Subpoenaed body cam footage. Interviewed all 14 complainants. Obtained arrest logs, patrol schedules, and internal emails through court orders the precinct fought at every stage. He mapped every arrest by date, zip code, and race. 89% of Brennan and Holloway's use of force arrests involved black suspects, in a district where the black population was 34%. The numbers didn't lie. The officers did. The morning after the bus incident, Terrence put on a pressed white shirt, a charcoal suit, and the navy tie his mother had given him for his first day at the DA's office. He buttoned his cuffs all the way down, rode the elevator to the 7th floor, nodded to colleagues at the coffee station, and sat at his desk as though the previous night had never happened. No one noticed anything. No one saw the swollen marks that pulsed beneath his sleeves each time he lifted a folder or reached for his mug. At 9:15, he called Eleanor Whitfield. "They pulled me off the bus last night," he said. "Brennan and Holloway." Silence. 5 full seconds. "Those are our officers," Whitfield said. "The ones in the file." "Yes, ma'am." Another pause. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Terrence looked at the spreadsheet on his screen. 24 entries. The red one glowing at the bottom. "I'm saying they just handed us the final piece." He hung up, opened folder number 2019-0384, and inserted a new tab at the back. He wrote on it in black ink, "Exhibit 24, Personal Testimony." Then he rolled his sleeves down, buttoned the cuffs over the bruises, and went back to work. The 2 weeks before the trial, Terrence Foster disappeared into the case. His apartment became the war room. The kitchen table vanished under stacked folders, printed email chains, and color-coded sticky notes mapped to a corkboard he had nailed above the counter. A timeline ran the full length of one wall, butcher paper taped end to end, entries written in 3 colors of marker, dates circled, arrows connecting incidents to officers to reports to the single captain who signed them all off. He worked 16-hour days. Coffee at 5 a.m., files open by 5:15. Breakfast was whatever he could eat with one hand while highlighting depositions with the other. Lunch didn't happen. Dinner was takeout from the Thai place on Whitmore, eaten standing over the sink so he wouldn't stain the documents. His phone rang on a Tuesday night. Gloria. "You sound tired, baby." "I'm fine, Ma." "You're not fine. You sound like you did during bar prep. Are you eating?" "I'm eating." "Real food?" "Real enough." A pause. Gloria had a way of holding silence that said more than most people's sentences. "Terrence, whatever this case is, promise me you're being careful." He looked at the timeline on his wall. 24 incidents spanning 4 years. 2 officers, 1 captain. A system designed to protect the ones wearing badges and punish the ones without them. "I'm close, Ma. Real close." She didn't ask what the case was. She never asked. She had learned, decades ago, that some answers only made the worrying worse. "I love you," she said. "Love you too." He hung up and turned back to the table. The file in front of him was what he privately called the pattern file, the prosecution's core exhibit. 8 months of evidence compressed into a single narrative document that walked through every complaint, every body cam failure, every statistical anomaly, every internal email that proved the 14th Precinct's review process was designed to clear, not to investigate. He opened the statistical section. The numbers were damning even at a glance. Brennan and Holloway's arrest data, sorted by race. 89% of their force-related stops involved black individuals. The district average for all other officer pairs was 41%. The gap wasn't a trend, it was a policy. He cross-referenced body cam logs. 4 separate dates where Brennan's and Holloway's cameras simultaneously malfunctioned: January 8th, August 22nd, October 15th, and now March 12th. All 4 involved black suspects. All 4 were reviewed and cleared by Captain Garrett within 72 hours. He pulled up the internal emails next. These had been the hardest to obtain. 3 months of legal motions, 2 appeals, 1 contempt hearing before a judge finally ordered the precinct to release them. The thread that mattered most was between Garrett and a lieutenant named Voss. Dated September of the previous year. Garrett's words. "Just file it and close it out. No follow-up needed. Same as the others." Same as the others. 5 words that proved a pattern of deliberate suppression. Terrence printed every page, organized them into tabbed sections, indexed them with a table of contents he typed himself. 43 exhibits, each one cross-referenced to the timeline on his wall. ADA Nathan Brooks stopped by Terrence's office on a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the trial. Brooks was a good prosecutor, cautious, experienced, well-liked by judges. He leaned against the doorframe and watched Terrence arrange binders on his desk. "You sure about this?" Brooks asked. "About what?" "Going after cops, Terrence. The union's already making noise. Garrett's got friends in the commissioner's office. You know how this plays out." Terrence didn't look up. "They came after me first." Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then he tapped the doorframe twice and left. That night, Terrence sat at his kitchen table one last time. The final version of the case file was complete. He counted the pages. 812. Every one printed, every one tabbed, every one ready. He opened the top drawer of his desk, the real desk, the one against the bedroom wall, and took out his father's badge. Tarnished brass. Badge number 1134. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it in his palm, then placed it back in the drawer and closed it. He slid the 800-page file into his leather briefcase. The same briefcase he had carried on the Route 7 bus. The same one the officers had thrown into an evidence bag. The same one that came back with a coffee stain. He closed the clasps and set the alarm for 4:30 a.m. Courtroom 4B, County Courthouse, 3rd floor. 8 a.m. on a Monday. The room smelled like old wood polish and recycled air. Fluorescent panels hummed above rows of wooden benches. A water pitcher sat on the judge's desk, beaded with condensation. The seal of the county hung on the wall behind the bench, brass, heavy, catching the overhead light. The gallery was already half full. Local reporters filled the first 2 rows on the left. Behind them, community members who had followed the case through pre-trial hearings. Pastors, activists, 2 city council members, a woman holding a folded sign she wasn't allowed to display inside. On the right side, a cluster of uniformed officers from the 14th precinct sat shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, faces set. Kyle Brennan and Todd Holloway entered through a side door with their defense attorney, a broad-shouldered man named Walter Stokes. Stokes had represented police officers in misconduct cases 11 times. He'd won 9. He walked with the confidence of a man who expected to make it 10. Brennan wore a navy suit that didn't fit quite right. The collar sat too high on his neck, the sleeves too long. He tugged at them as he sat down. Holloway wore gray, his jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the gallery like a man counting exits. They looked uncomfortable, but not worried. Not yet. Judge Alma Patterson took the bench at 8:15. 63 years old, 20 years on the circuit. Wire-rimmed glasses, close-cropped silver hair, a reputation for running her courtroom the way a surgeon runs an operating room. Precise, quiet, and intolerant of wasted time. "This court is now in session," she said. "The People versus Brennan and Holloway. Case number 2019-0384. Is the prosecution ready?" The side door behind the prosecution table opened. Terrence Foster walked in. Navy suit, white shirt, the leather briefcase in his left hand. He set it on the table, opened the clasps, and began removing folders. 1, 2, 3, 4, stacking them with the calm precision of a man who had rehearsed this moment 100 times in his kitchen. Holloway saw him first. The color drained from his face like water from a cracked glass. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He grabbed Brennan's arm under the table. Brennan turned, followed Holloway's stare to the prosecution table, and went still. The man they had dragged off the Route 7 bus. The man they had cuffed and shoved into a holding cell. The man whose briefcase they had tossed in a plastic bag. He was standing behind the prosecution table, adjusting his cuffs. and he was about to spend the next several hours dismantling their careers. "The people are ready, Your Honor," Terrence said. His voice was level, not aggressive, not theatrical. The voice of a man who had waited 8 months for this room and had no intention of rushing through it. He began with the weakest evidence, by design. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to enter Exhibit 1, the complaint history filed against officers Brennan and Holloway over the past 4 years." A screen mounted on the courtroom wall lit up. 14 complaint summaries appeared in a list. Names, dates, descriptions, dispositions. Every disposition read the same. Reviewed and cleared, unsubstantiated. Stokes was on his feet immediately. "Your Honor, these complaints were investigated and dismissed through proper internal review channels. They prove nothing except that unverified allegations were handled appropriately." "The people acknowledge that each complaint was reviewed internally," Terrence responded, not turning to face Stokes. "We will demonstrate that the review process itself was compromised. But first, we'd like to establish the volume." Patterson nodded. "Proceed." 14 complaints, each one summarized in 2 sentences, each one ending with the same word: unsubstantiated. The repetition was deliberate. By the 6th, the gallery was shifting. By the 10th, a reporter was shaking her head. By the 14th, Stokes had stopped objecting. Volume established. Then, the bus footage. "Exhibit 7, Terrence said. Surveillance video from the Route 7 bus, captured on the evening of March 12th. Duration, 11 minutes and 43 seconds. The screen changed. Grainy color footage, wide angle. The full length of the bus aisle visible from the camera mounted above the driver. The courtroom went quiet. The video showed what the incident report didn't. Gerald Phelps, the drunk white passenger, standing in row 6, swaying, jabbing his finger at the driver, slurring profanities. 2 women in row 4 pulling their bags closer. A teenager in the back putting in earbuds to block out the noise. And in row 9, a man in a gray jacket, sitting perfectly still, a leather briefcase on his lap, turning pages. The bus stopped. Doors opened. 2 officers boarded. They walked down the aisle. They passed Gerald Phelps without a glance. They passed the 2 women. They passed the teenager. They stopped at row 9. Brennan leaned over the seated man. Words exchanged. The bus camera had no audio. Then Brennan grabbed the man's collar. Holloway took his arm. The briefcase fell. Papers scattered. The man was pulled from his seat, turned, cuffed, and marched down the aisle past 30 watching faces. Gerald Phelps remained in row 6, untouched, unseen, unbothered. The footage ran for another 2 minutes after the officers exited. Phelps sat back down, mumbled something, and fell asleep against the window. Judge Patterson's pen had stopped moving. Stokes stood. "Your Honor, the officers responded to a dispatch call reporting a disturbance. They made a judgment in a dynamic situation." "A dynamic situation," Terrence repeated, pressing a button on his laptop. The screen split. On the left, the bus video paused on the moment Brennan passed Phelps. On the right, the 911 dispatch transcript. Terrence read it aloud. "Caller, bus driver, Route 7. Quote, I have a white male, mid-40s, intoxicated, yelling at me about the route change. He's scaring my passengers." End quote. He let the silence hold for 3 seconds. The dispatch described a white male. The officers arrested a black male. The video confirms the white male was the source of the disturbance. The officers walked past him. Stokes opened his mouth, closed it, sat down. Terrence moved to the final tier. Exhibit 12 through 16. Body cam footage from 5 prior incidents involving officers Brennan and Holloway. 5 videos played in sequence. 5 different dates. 5 different locations. The same pattern each time. A disturbance involving a non-black individual. Officers arriving. Officers bypassing the actual suspect. Officers detaining the nearest black person present. The 5th video had audio. The footage showed a convenience store parking lot. A white teenager had been reported for shoplifting. Brennan and Holloway arrived. walked past the teenager sitting on the curb with the stolen merchandise still in his lap, and approached a black man loading groceries into his car 20 feet away. On the audio, Holloway's voice. "Just grab the black one. Easier paperwork." The courtroom erupted, voices overlapping. A woman in the gallery stood up. Judge Patterson struck the gavel 3 times. "Order! This court will have order." Brennan sat frozen. Holloway's head dropped to his chest. Stokes was writing furiously on a legal pad, but his hand had started shaking. Terrence closed his laptop. He didn't need the screen anymore. The evidence was in the room now, in the silence of the officers, in the trembling hand of their attorney, in the faces of the jurors who had stopped blinking. He straightened his folders, aligned them with the edge of the table, and returned to his seat. The prosecution rested its opening evidence. The courtroom had not fully recovered from the body cam audio when Terrence Foster stood again. He didn't approach the podium. He stayed behind the prosecution table and began unbuttoning his left shirt cuff. Slowly. One button, then the other. He rolled the sleeve to his elbow, then the right sleeve. Same deliberate pace. The courtroom watched in silence. On both wrists, fading bruises. Yellow-green at the edges, still dark purple at the center. The marks of handcuffs. 6 days old. He raised both arms slightly. Not dramatically, not for theater, just enough for the jury to see. "Your Honor," he said, "members of the jury, my name is Terrence Foster. I am an assistant district attorney assigned to the county prosecutor's office, Special Investigations Division. For the past 8 months, I have led the investigation into systemic racial profiling within the 14th Precinct, the investigation that produced every exhibit you have seen today." He paused, let the words settle. "On the evening of March 12th, I was riding the Route 7 bus home from this office. I was sitting in row 9, reviewing documents from this case file, the same file now entered into evidence. Officers Brennan and Holloway boarded that bus in response to a disturbance call. They walked past the individual who caused the disturbance. They stopped at my seat. They pulled me from the bus, placed me in handcuffs, and transported me to the 14th Precinct, where I was held for 4 hours without charges." He lowered his arms, buttoned neither cuff. "These bruises are from their handcuffs. This case file is from 8 months of investigation, and I am standing here today not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as the prosecutor assigned to present the evidence." The courtroom was absolutely still. No coughing, no shifting, no pens scratching on notepads. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold their breath. Brennan's face had gone the color of old newspaper. His hands lay flat on the defense table, fingers spread, as if the wood were the only thing keeping him upright. Holloway sat with his chin nearly touching his chest, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere on the floor between his shoes. Walter Stokes rose immediately. His voice had the sharp edge of a man reaching for the only tool left in his kit. "Your Honor, I move to disqualify Mr. Foster from this case on the grounds of conflict of interest. He is a named victim in one of the incidents under prosecution. His objectivity is irreparably compromised." Judge Patterson removed her glasses and set them on the bench. She looked at Stokes for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Foster disclosed the March 12th incident to this court and to the County Recusal Board on March 14th, 2 days after it occurred. The board conducted a full review and issued a written clearance on March 21st, finding that Mr. Foster's involvement as a victim in a single incident did not compromise his ability to prosecute the broader pattern case, particularly given that the evidence for the remaining 23 incidents was compiled independently prior to his personal encounter." She put her glasses back on. "The motion to disqualify is denied. Mr. Foster is the most qualified prosecutor for this case. He built it, he understands it, and as of March 12th, he has lived it." Stokes sat down slowly. Brennan leaned toward him, whispering something urgent. Stokes didn't turn his head. In the gallery, a woman in the 3rd row pressed her hand over her mouth. A man 2 seats down wiped his eyes with the back of his fist. One of the city council members was typing on his phone under the bench. A reporter in the front row had stopped writing, her pen hovering above the notebook, her lips parted. Within minutes, the first message appeared on social media. A text post from someone in the gallery. The prosecutor just showed the courtroom his handcuff bruises. He was the man on the bus. Hashtag #BusFoster. The hashtag spread. By the time court recessed for lunch, hashtag #BusFoster had 12,000 shares. Terrence didn't look at his phone. He gathered his folders, placed them back in the briefcase, and walked to the prosecution's prep room down the hall. He sat alone at a metal table, drank a cup of water, and opened the cross-examination notes for the afternoon session. He rolled his sleeves back down, buttoned the cuffs. There was still work to do. The afternoon session began at 1:30. The gallery was fuller now. Word had spread during the lunch recess, through text messages, through the hashtag, through the kind of courthouse whisper that moves faster than any press release. Every bench was occupied. People stood along the back wall. Terrence called Officer Kyle Brennan to the stand. Brennan walked to the witness box like a man crossing a frozen lake, careful, rigid, testing each step. He placed his right hand on the Bible, swore the oath, and sat down without making eye contact with anyone. Terrence stood behind the prosecution table. He didn't pace. He didn't lean. He held a single sheet of paper. Officer Brennan, on the evening of March 12th, you filed an incident report describing the suspect as, and I'm quoting, aggressive and non-compliant. Is that accurate? That's what the report says. You also wrote that the suspect stood up in the aisle and used profane language toward passengers, correct? Correct. Terrence pressed a key on his laptop. The bus video appeared on the courtroom screen, paused at the moment Brennan boarded. Officer Brennan, can you point to the moment in this footage where the suspect stands up? Brennan stared at the screen. His jaw worked once, twice. No sound came out. Take your time, Terrence said. 12 seconds of silence. I'd have to review the footage more closely, Brennan said. You had 4 hours to review it before filing your report. You chose not to. Terrence turned to the jury. The video, which the court has already admitted, shows the suspect seated from the moment he boarded the bus until the moment officers physically removed him. He did not stand. He did not shout. He did not use profane language. He placed the incident report next to a screenshot of the video on the split screen. The report's words on the left, the image on the right. A man sitting quietly with a briefcase on his lap. Your report doesn't match the video, officer. Can you explain the discrepancy? Stokes objected. Your Honor, counsel is badgering. Overruled. The witness may answer. Brennan licked his lips. It was a fast-moving situation. Adrenaline. Things happen quickly. Quickly, Terrence repeated. He pressed another key. A new screen. Let me show you something that happened slowly. He pulled up Brennan's body cam logs. Your body cam was listed as malfunctioning on March 12th. Is that correct? There was a technical issue. Terrence clicked forward. 3 more dates appeared beside March 12th. January 8th. Body cam malfunction during an arrest of a black male on Vine Street. August 22nd. Body cam malfunction during a stop and frisk of a black teenager on Elm. October 15th. Body cam malfunction during a traffic stop involving a black motorist on Route 9. He paused. 4 malfunctions in 8 months, all involving black individuals. All reviewed and cleared by Captain Garrett within 72 hours. Is that a pattern you'd like to explain to the jury, officer? Brennan's attorney was on his feet. Objection. Compound. Argumentative. Withdrawn, Terrence said calmly. I'll move on. He turned to Officer Holloway next. Holloway had been watching from the defense table, his leg bouncing under the surface. When called to the stand, he walked quickly, too quickly, and nearly tripped on the step. Terrence's approach was different this time, quieter, almost conversational. Officer Holloway, you've been partnered with Officer Brennan for 4 years. In that time, how many use-of-force arrests have you made together? I don't have the exact number. 63. I do. Terrence glanced at his notes. Of those 63, 56 involved black suspects. That's 89%. The district population is 34% black. Can you explain that ratio? Holloway blinked. We patrol high-crime areas. The data shows your patrol zone is residential, officer. Median household income, $62,000. Crime index below city average. Terrence let that land. I'll ask again. Can you explain the ratio? No answer. Terrence placed a printed email on the overhead display. From Captain Garrett to Lieutenant Voss. The line highlighted in yellow. Just file it and close it out. No follow-up needed. Same as the others. Officer Holloway, were you aware that your commanding officer was instructing subordinates to dismiss complaints against you without investigation? Holloway's mouth opened, closed. His eyes flicked to Garrett in the gallery. Garrett sat perfectly still, his face the color of ash. I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right, Holloway said. Terrence nodded once. No further questions. He returned to the prosecution table, closed his folder, and sat down. The jury hadn't blinked in 4 minutes. Closing arguments came on the second day. Walter Stokes went first. He spoke for 22 minutes. He talked about the pressures of policing, the split-second decisions officers make under fire, the impossibility of perfection in a job that demands it. He used the phrase, good men in difficult circumstances, 4 times. He never addressed the bus video. He never mentioned the body cam audio. He never explained the statistics. When he sat down, the courtroom felt like a room where someone had opened a window into nothing. Then Terrence stood. He walked to the center of the floor, between the prosecution table and the jury box. No notes, no laptop, no screen. Just his voice and the 12 people who would decide what happened next. This case, he said, is not about one bus ride. He paused, let the sentence breathe. It would be easy to make it about one night. March 12th. The Route 7. A man dragged from his seat in handcuffs, while the actual suspect sat untouched 3 rows away. That's a clear story. It makes people angry. It trends on social media. And it would be enough for most cases. He took 1 step closer to the jury. But this case is about what happened before March 12th, and what would have happened after if no one had ever looked. He spoke about the 14 complaints, not as numbers, as people. He named them. Darnell Price, 17 years old, slammed into the hood of a cruiser for crossing the street 10 feet outside a crosswalk. He was walking home from his grandmother's house. Evelyn Saunders, 68, pulled from her apartment hallway at 11 p.m. because she matched a description. The description was black female, medium build. Mrs. Saunders is 5'2" and uses a walker. Andre Coleman, 21, tased during a traffic stop for reaching toward his glove compartment. The officer had just told him to get his registration. He was reaching for his registration. Each name landed like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples reached every corner of the room. 14 people filed complaints, Terrence continued. 14 times they walked into the precinct, filled out a form, described what happened, and trusted that someone would listen. 14 times Captain Garrett signed the review. 14 times the word unsubstantiated appeared on the final page. 14 people were told in writing that what happened to them didn't matter. He stopped walking, stood still in front of juror number 4, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, her hands folded tight in her lap. This case is about body cams that fail only when the suspect is black. It's about arrest statistics that would be laughed out of any first-year analytics class. It's about a captain who wrote, "Just file it and close it out," in an email he thought no one would ever read. He turned back to face the full jury. And yes, this case is also about me. On March 12th, I was sitting on that bus reading documents from this very file. I was doing my job. Officers Brennan and Holloway boarded, walked past the intoxicated white man who had caused the disturbance, and arrested me, a black man, reading. His voice didn't rise. It didn't crack. It stayed exactly where it had been from the first word. Steady, measured, and immovable. My father was a police officer. He died trying to stop his colleagues from beating a teenager during a traffic stop. There was no camera that day. No footage, no record. Just a report that said, accidental. I became a prosecutor so there would always be a record. So the next family wouldn't have to wonder. So the next complaint wouldn't disappear into a box by the door. He stepped back to the prosecution table, placed one hand on the leather briefcase. The evidence is clear. The pattern is documented. The system that protected these officers has been exposed. I'm asking you to do what 14 review boards refused to. Look at the evidence and call it what it is. He sat down. The jury deliberated for 3 hours and 11 minutes. When they returned, the foreperson, a retired schoolteacher named Helen Watts, stood with a single sheet of paper. On the charge of excessive force, guilty. On the charge of falsifying official reports, guilty. On the charge of civil rights violations under color of law, guilty. Each word fell like a door closing. Brennan collapsed forward in his chair, both hands covering his face. Holloway sat rigid, tears running in 2 straight lines down his cheeks, making no move to wipe them. Judge Patterson removed her glasses and addressed the courtroom. This court recognizes that the conduct at issue was not the failure of 2 individuals alone. It was enabled by a chain of institutional negligence, from supervisors who signed without reading, to review boards that cleared without investigating, to a precinct culture that treated accountability as an inconvenience. Sentencing will reflect both the individual violations and the systemic failures that allowed them to persist. She struck the gavel once. In the gallery, Captain Lyle Garrett sat motionless as 2 internal affairs officers approached from opposite ends of his row. They spoke quietly. Garrett stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out between them without a word. He would face his own charges within the month. Terrence remained at the prosecution table while the courtroom emptied. A reporter called his name from the gallery railing. Cameras flashed. He gathered his folders, closed the briefcase, and walked to the courthouse steps. The afternoon sun hit his face for the first time in 2 days. Microphones and cameras formed a half circle around him. He said one sentence. Justice doesn't require anger. It requires evidence. Then he walked down the steps and didn't look back. 6 months later, Kyle Brennan was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Excessive force, falsifying official reports, civil rights violations. He was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, the same model he had put on Terrence Foster on the Route 7 bus. Todd Holloway received 3 years. He cooperated during sentencing, providing testimony that opened a secondary investigation into the 14th Precinct's internal review process. His badge was revoked permanently. He would never wear a uniform again. Captain Lyle Garrett was terminated 2 weeks after the verdict. His own trial came 3 months later. Obstruction, suppression of evidence, failure of duty. Guilty on all counts. 31 years on the force, ended with a prison number. The 14th Precinct was restructured from the ground up. Mandatory tamper-proof body cams, an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power, a new complaint protocol requiring investigations by officers outside the accused's chain of command. All 14 original complainants received a formal letter of apology from the county. Darnell Price, the teenager slammed into a cruiser hood for jaywalking, was 19 now. He spoke at the first public oversight meeting for 4 quiet minutes. He didn't raise his voice once. Terrence Foster was appointed special counsel on police reform for the state attorney general's office. The position was created specifically for the work he had done. He accepted it at a small ceremony in the county courthouse, the same building where he had rolled up his sleeves 6 months earlier. His mother, Gloria, sat in the front row. Same blue dress she wore to his law school graduation. When the Attorney General shook Terrence's hand, Gloria pressed a tissue to her eyes and whispered something to the woman beside her. No one heard what she said. She didn't need them to. Terrence wore his father's badge pinned inside his jacket pocket, not visible to anyone, just close enough to feel against his chest when he breathed. That evening, Terrence walked 6 blocks to the bus stop on Whitmore and Cedar. The Route 7 pulled up at 7:15, right on time. He boarded, tapped his card, and sat down in row 9. Same seat. He opened his briefcase, new leather, no coffee stain, and pulled out a fresh case file. Another precinct, another pattern. The bus rolled into evening traffic. The city slid past the windows, streetlights, storefronts, people walking home in the last warm glow of the day. Terrence turned a page and kept reading. If you were on that bus that night, would you have spoken up? Or would you have watched? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story hit you the way it hit me, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more stories like this one, and they need to be told.